Welcome to Hello Therapy, a podcast to help you take charge of your mental health through evidence-based psychological tips and tools straight from the therapy room so that you can live life better. When you experience OCD, it can feel like you are caught in a never-ending loop of intrusive thoughts, compulsive behaviours and actions that take away your time, your energy, and your peace. In this episode, I'm going to talk you through 3 things that might well be keeping you trapped in OCD and how to deal with them. I'm your host, Dr. Liz White, a consultant clinical psychologist with over 20 years experience in mental health. So let's dive in. OCD is characterised by repetitive and intrusive thoughts, images, impulses, and urges, as well as behaviours and actions that a person with OCD feels like they need to engage in. OCD is a complex mental health problem with a wide array of different subtypes. But regardless of what subtype you experience, there are some things that can keep you trapped. And the first of these is something called thought-action fusion. Thought-action fusion is a particular cognitive thinking style that is really unhelpful. It is the belief that a thought is linked or fused to a particular behaviour, action, or outcome. There are 2 types of thought-action fusion: moral thought-action fusion and likelihood thought-action fusion. Moral thought-action fusion is the belief that unacceptable thoughts are morally equivalent to overt unacceptable actions. So let's say that you are taking a stroll outside, there's lots of people on the streets, and you see a person in front of you. The thought pops into your mind, push him over. The act of having that thought feels morally equivalent to actually pushing the person over. And what happens next is feelings of guilt, feelings of shame. How could I think thoughts like that? I'm not a violent person, but maybe I am. Maybe I'm a bad person. And then all of the doubts cascade in. On the other hand, likelihood thought-action fusion refers to the belief that certain thoughts cause or increase the likelihood of particular events occurring. Likelihood thought-action fusion has 2 forms. It can either be directed at yourself or other people. So for example, you may have the thought, if I think about me being in a plane crash, then it's much more likely to happen. Or it will happen. With the example of others, it would be, if I think that my family are going to be in a plane crash, then it's more likely or may cause that to happen. Now, thought-action fusion is a particularly sticky trap in OCD because it tends to be an underlying belief that you may not be aware of, but is guiding your thoughts and your actions all the same. So here is my tip in dealing with thought-action fusion. Try and take a more observational approach to your mind and your thoughts. So rather than buying into everything that your mind says, i.e. believing what your mind says, what you want to try and do is diffuse, i.e. step back from your thoughts, notice them, observe them. So having a thought about you being in a plane crash is just a thought about you being in a plane crash. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, the second trap in OCD that you can get caught up in is avoidance. Avoidance isn't just a feature of OCD, it's a feature of a lot of other mental health problems, particularly anxiety issues. Now, avoidance in OCD usually occurs in an attempt to reduce uncertainty, doubt, anxiety, the obsessional thoughts, the compulsions, basically anything to do with the OCD experience. For example, a person with contamination OCD or who fears germs and fears contaminating themselves or others may avoid preparing food for their family, because if they do, they know that that will trigger the obsessional intrusive thoughts about Have I prepared the food right? Were the surfaces clean? Are my family going to get ill? Now, avoidance is a trap because although you may find that your anxiety, distress, the doubts, the intrusive thoughts reduce if you avoid certain things, that effect doesn't last, because what you tend to find is that the obsessional thoughts, the intrusive thoughts, the doubt, the urges, the impulses, they come back. And the more you avoid things, the more your life gets smaller, and the less you do, the less you want to do. So my tip with avoidance in OCD is this. Write a list of all of the things that you are avoiding in your life. Be super honest with yourself. This list is only for you. Now, once you have that list, choose the least anxiety-provoking item on that list and write down the smallest step that you could take in doing that thing. So, for example, if you have been avoiding going out socially because you know that that tends to trigger off the intrusive thoughts, and as a result, you haven't seen your friends in a long time, rather than just going out with your friends one night, perhaps a smaller step would be just messaging one friend. And the idea is that even though taking those small steps might be anxiety provoking and it might increase the intrusive thoughts, what's important here is you having an experience of doing those things that you fear, doing those things that you have avoided, and realizing, oh, okay, I can actually do these things. I can manage the OCD and do the things that are important to me. I don't have to let OCD get in the way of doing the things that I enjoy or that are meaningful to me. So the third trap is reassurance seeking. Now, reassurance seeking is a bit like avoidance in that it might help you with the anxiety, the uncertainty, the doubt temporarily. It doesn't help in the long term. And actually what you find is that the more you seek reassurance, the more reassurance you need. Reassurance seeking comes in two forms, either self-reassurance or getting reassurance from others. So for example, someone with contamination fears may be walking down the street and have the intrusive thought, I've stepped in dog poo. But the self-reassurance comes in by saying, well, if I had stepped in dog poo, then it would be on my shoe and I would be able to smell it and I would know that I stepped in dog poo, etc. Now, in contrast to self-reassurance, reassurance seeking from others tends to lull the person into a false sense of security. They feel like they have reduced the risk of harm or negative consequences by having someone confirm, for example, oh yes, you really did lock the window or lock the door, or you really did wash your hands enough. Now, the difficulty with reassurance seeking is that it can quickly become another compulsion, and it creates a reassurance trap whereby you feel like you need the reassurance in order to cope with the OCD. And being stuck in the reassurance trap means that you're not then able to explore other coping strategies. So, for example, noticing and naming your thoughts and your feelings, or learning how to sit with anxiety and uncertainty and doubt, learning how to let your intrusive thoughts come and go without having to act on them. So here's my tip for reassurance seeking. For self-reassurance, really try and notice when you are doing it or just before you know that you're going to reassure yourself. So just try and catch it, because if you can catch it, you can make a decision in the moment. Okay, this is unhelpful to me. It keeps things going. Do I want to give myself reassurance, or can I prevent myself from doing that and sit with the anxiety? If you tend to seek reassurance from others a lot, then studies show that just suddenly stopping getting reassurance isn't that helpful and can actually cause more distress. So a better approach is to seek support rather than reassurance. And you would need to get the other person on board for this. So maybe sitting down with them and just talking through, look, I noticed that I'm seeking reassurance a lot. It's a big part of the OCD. How can we handle this in a different way? And so it might be you asking the other person, look, when I ask for reassurance, can you just point out to me that that's what I'm doing? So for example, I'm noticing that you're trying to get reassurance from me right now. That's not helpful to you, but how can I support you instead? How can I help you manage the anxiety and the uncertainty that's showing up for you? Even just asking the question, so rather than giving reassurance off the bat, just asking the question, look, what else is going to be helpful apart from reassurance seeking right now? Now that brings us to the end of this episode. I do hope it was helpful to you. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hello Therapy. If you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, follow and review. You can get more well-being and mental health tips by joining our email list and visiting the resources section of our website at harleyclinical.co.uk. The Hello Therapy podcast and the information provided by me, Dr. Liz White, is solely intended for information and educational purposes and does not constitute personalised advice. Please do reach out to your GP or a mental health professional if you need support. Until next time, take care of yourself.